The police officer slammed his hand down hard on the scratched formica table, making the salt and pepper shakers jump. His voice cut through the warm evening air of the diner like a knife. "People like you don't belong here." He grabbed the man's coffee mug, still half full, still steaming, and without hesitation, poured it slowly onto the floor. The dark liquid splashed across the worn tiles, spreading in a wide, ugly puddle. The entire diner went silent. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. Forks paused halfway to mouths. A child's laughter died in her throat. Every eye in that small roadside diner turned toward the corner booth. But what the officer didn't know, what he couldn't possibly have known, was that this quiet stranger sitting alone, minding his own business, wasn't just anyone. He was Steven Seagal, a martial arts legend who'd spent decades mastering discipline and control. A former law enforcement officer himself who had walked the same beat, worn the same badge, taken the same oath, and someone who had spent his entire life teaching respect, teaching discipline, teaching that true power comes from restraint, not force. And what happened in the next 30 minutes, what unfolded in that small diner just outside Flagstaff, Arizona, would not only expose the officer's cruelty for the entire world to see, but it would change the lives of everyone in that diner forever. Some would find courage, some would find shame, and one man would find redemption. It started like any other quiet Sunday evening at Mel's Diner, a small, unassuming roadside spot just off Route 66, 15 miles outside Flagstaff, Arizona. The kind of place truckers stopped for strong coffee and hot pie. The kind of place where families gathered in cracked vinyl booths after church. The kind of place where the waitress knew your name by your second visit. Families sat in booths, chatting softly over plates of meatloaf and mashed potatoes. Truckers sipped black coffee at the long counter, shoulders hunched, eyes tired from the road. The smell of sizzling bacon and fresh pancakes filled the air, mixing with the faint scent of old vinyl and pine sol. A jukebox in the corner played a Patsy Cline song, low and scratchy. Everything was calm. Everything was peaceful. Everything was exactly as it should be. Until Officer Brock Henley walked in. He was known in this town, not for protecting people, not for serving with honor, but for intimidating them, for pushing his weight around, for making sure everyone knew who had the power. Tall, broad-shouldered, with a buzz cut and a permanent scowl, his badge gleamed under the fluorescent lights like a warning. He always walked like he owned every room he entered. And tonight, he was looking for someone to remind of that fact. His eyes scanned the diner slowly, methodically, like a predator searching for prey. And then he found his target, a man sitting alone in the corner booth, quiet, still, dressed in a simple black jacket and faded jeans. No phone out, no laptop, no fuss. Just a man having a quiet meal, a plate of eggs and toast in front of him, a cup of coffee beside it. Steven Seagal. But Officer Henley didn't recognize him. He didn't see a legend. He didn't see a teacher. He didn't see someone worthy of respect. He only saw what he wanted to see, a stranger, an outsider, someone he could flex his authority on, someone he could control. Officer Brock Henley stood in the doorway for a moment, letting it swing shut behind him with a loud bang that made several diners flinch. He adjusted his belt, heavy with equipment, gun, baton, cuffs, and let his eyes settle on the quiet man in the corner booth. Something about him irritated Henley immediately. Maybe it was the calm on his face. Maybe it was the way he didn't look up when the door slammed. Maybe it was simply that he looked unbothered. And Officer Henley didn't like people who looked unbothered. In his mind, unbothered meant disrespectful. Unbothered meant they didn't fear him. And if they didn't fear him, he had to fix that. He walked slowly across the diner floor, boots heavy on the tile, deliberately loud. The conversations around him dimmed. People sensed something coming. Donna, the older waitress with silver hair pulled back in a tight bun, froze near the kitchen with a coffee pot in her hand. She'd worked at Mel's Diner for 23 years. She'd seen Officer Henley come in here dozens of times, and she knew that look in his eyes. Someone was about to have a very bad night. Henley stopped directly beside Steven's booth, looming over him, casting a shadow across the table. "Hey, you!" Steven looked up slowly, his face calm, his eyes steady and clear. There was no fear in them, no anger, just quiet awareness. "Yes, officer." His voice was low, measured, respectful. "You got ID." Steven set down his fork carefully, wiped his mouth with a paper napkin and nodded. "I do." "Is there a problem?" Henley's jaw tightened. "I'll decide if there's a problem. Show me your ID, now." The word "no" echoed through the diner like a threat. A young mother 2 booths over pulled her daughter closer. Earl, a gray-haired truck driver sitting at the counter, turned on his stool to watch, his weathered face creasing with concern. Steven reached slowly into the inner pocket of his black jacket, moving deliberately, no sudden movements, and pulled out a worn leather wallet. He opened it, removed his California driver's license, and handed it over without a word. Henley snatched it from his hand and barely glanced at it. His eyes flicked over the name, the photo, the address. But he wasn't really reading it. He was performing, establishing dominance, making sure everyone in that diner knew he was in charge. California, huh? He said the word like it was an insult. What are you doing here? Just passing through. Having dinner? Passing through. Henley smirked, shaking his head slowly. We don't like drifters here. Steven's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes, not anger but sadness. I'm not a drifter, officer. I'm just a traveler. Sure you are. Henley tossed the ID back onto the table carelessly, like it was a piece of trash. It slid across the formica and nearly fell into Steven's lap. Donna, the waitress, took a hesitant step forward, her voice soft and nervous. Officer Henley, is everything okay? He's been a perfect customer. Polite, quiet, no trouble at all. Henley's head snapped toward her, his eyes blazing. Did I ask you, Donna? She stepped back immediately, her face flushing with embarrassment and fear. No, sir. I'm sorry. Then keep your mouth shut. The diner seemed to shrink. People looked down at their plates. A teenage boy in a booth near the window pulled out his phone and started recording, holding it low, trying not to be noticed. Steven's jaw tightened just slightly, the only outward sign that something was bothering him. But he stayed calm, because he knew something Officer Henley didn't. Real power doesn't need to shout. Real strength doesn't need to intimidate. And a man who truly has authority doesn't need to demand respect, he earns it. Officer, Steven said quietly, his voice even, I haven't caused any trouble. I'm just here to eat. I'll be gone in 20 minutes. Henley's face darkened. He pulled out a chair. The metal legs screeching loudly against the floor, turned it backward, and sat down across from Steven without being invited. He leaned forward, resting his arms on the back of the chair, invading Steven's space. So California, let me guess. He looked Steven up and down with exaggerated slowness. Actor, musician, one of those Hollywood types slumming it on Route 66. Trying to find yourself. Steven didn't answer immediately. He just looked at the officer with those calm, unreadable eyes that had stared down far more dangerous men than this. I've done a bit of film work, he said finally. But mostly I just try to live quietly. Film work. Henley laughed, a harsh mocking sound. Yeah, I bet, let me guess. Extra. Stunt guy. Background actor waiting for your big break. A young couple 2 booths over glanced at each other nervously. The woman whispered, Should we say something? Her boyfriend shook his head. Don't get involved. But he pulled out his phone too, and started recording. Earl, the truck driver at the counter, set down his coffee cup slowly and turned fully on his stool. He'd driven trucks for 37 years. He'd seen a lot of things. And he knew injustice when he saw it. Donna stood frozen near the kitchen door, clutching the coffee pot so tightly her knuckles were white. She wanted to say something. She wanted to step in. But she'd seen what happened to people who challenged Officer Henley, and she had bills to pay. Steven took a slow, deep breath. Officer, I'm just here to eat. I haven't caused any trouble. I haven't broken any laws. I'd appreciate it if you'd let me finish my meal in peace. Henley's eyes narrowed dangerously. You think you can tell me what to do? I'm not telling you. I'm asking. Respectfully, respectfully. Henley's voice dripped with sarcasm. You know what I think. I think you're casing this place. Maybe planning to rob it later tonight. Or maybe you're on the run from something. Maybe that ID's fake. Steven's expression didn't change. I'm neither of those things. Prove it. I already showed you my ID. IDs can be faked. Steven took another slow breath, his hands resting calmly on the table. He had been a reserve deputy sheriff in Louisiana. He had trained with law enforcement agencies. He had worked alongside officers who took their oaths seriously, who believed in protecting and serving, not bullying and intimidating. But this man sitting across from him. This man was everything wrong with unchecked power. This man had forgotten, or maybe never learned, that a badge doesn't make you better than anyone. It makes you responsible for everyone. Officer Henley, Steven said quietly, his voice carrying a weight that made several people in the diner sit up straighter. I think you should step back and reconsider how you're handling this situation. The air in the diner seemed to freeze. Henley's face turned red. His jaw clenched. His hand moved instinctively toward his belt. Oh, you think? His voice rose, loud enough that everyone in the diner could hear. You think you can tell me how to do my job? I'm not telling you. I'm suggesting. There's a difference. Henley stood abruptly, his chair scraping backward. Get up. Steven looked up at him calmly. Excuse me, I said get up. Now. Steven stayed seated, his hands still resting on the table, his posture relaxed but ready. I haven't broken any laws, officer. You're refusing a lawful order. That's obstruction. Asking me to stand without probable cause isn't a lawful order. Henley's hand moved to his belt, not to his gun but to his baton. He gripped it. The diner went absolutely silent. You could hear the hum of the refrigerator behind the counter, the tick of the old clock on the wall, the ragged breathing of Officer Henley as his anger boiled over. Donna gasped softly, her hand covering her mouth. Earl stood up from his stool. Henley, come on, man. He's just eating. Leave him alone. Henley's head whipped toward him. Sit down, Earl, or you're next. Earl hesitated, his hands clenched into fists, every instinct telling him to step in. But he was 60, 4 years old. He had grandkids, and he knew how this would end. So he sat, but he didn't stop watching. Steven's eyes never left Officer Henley's, and in that moment, everyone in that diner saw two very different kinds of strength. One loud, desperate, needing to be seen. One quiet, controlled, needing nothing. One demanding respect through fear. One earning it through dignity. And the tension in the air grew so thick you could cut it with a knife. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments. And if you've ever been disrespected by someone in power, someone who thought their badge, their title, or their position made them better than you, type respite below. Because this story is for you, and what happens next is something no one in that diner will ever forget. 3 weeks later, Officer Brock Henley was called into a conference room at the Flagstaff Police Department. The email had come at 70 a.m. that morning. Subject line, mandatory meeting, 10 a.m., conference room B. No explanation, no details. Just those few words that made Henley's stomach turn. He'd barely slept in the 3 weeks since the incident. The video had spread like wildfire, millions of views, thousands of comments. News outlets across the country had picked it up. His face was everywhere. His name was everywhere. And every single day he woke up to messages calling him a bully, a disgrace, a tyrant in uniform. His girlfriend had left him. His friends had stopped answering his calls. Even his own mother had sent him a text that simply said, "I'm disappointed." And now, this meeting. He walked down the hallway of the police station, his boots echoing on the linoleum floor. Officers he passed didn't meet his eyes. Some whispered as he walked by. He could feel their judgment like a weight pressing down on his shoulders. When he reached conference room B, he paused outside the door, his hand on the handle, heart pounding in his chest. He took a deep breath and pushed it open. Sitting at the long table were 4 people. Sergeant Dalton sat at the head, his face hard and unreadable. Next to him was Chief Patricia Morrison, a stern woman in her 50s with silver hair pulled back tight, her uniform crisp and perfectly pressed. Beside her sat Detective Marcus Hall from Internal Affairs, a thin man with glasses and a notepad in front of him. And at the far end of the table sat a woman Henley recognized immediately, Councilwoman Janet Torres, a representative from the mayor's office. This wasn't just a department issue anymore. This was political. Henley's stomach dropped like a stone. "Sit down, Officer Henley," Chief Morrison said, her voice cold and clipped. He sat, his hands trembling slightly as he placed them on the table. No one spoke for a moment. The silence was suffocating. Finally, Chief Morrison opened a folder in front of her and slid a printed document across the table toward him. "We've completed our investigation into the incident at Mel's Diner on the evening of October 14th. Henley swallowed hard, his throat dry. And Detective Hall adjusted his glasses and spoke in a monotone voice, reading from his notes. "You violated Department Policy 4-12 regarding use of authority. You violated Mr. Seagal's Fourth Amendment rights by detaining him without probable cause. You acted with excessive aggression. You failed to de-escalate a non-threatening situation. You destroyed private property, the coffee mug. You created a hostile environment for civilian witnesses. And you brought disrepute to this department and the badge you wear." Each word landed like a hammer blow. Henley's face burned with shame. "But I thought he was. Let me finish." Chief Morrison interrupted sharply. Henley closed his mouth. She leaned forward, her eyes boring into him. "Normally, Officer Henley, this would result in immediate termination. No severance. No recommendation. Your career in law enforcement would be over." Henley felt his chest tighten. His vision blurred slightly. This was it. Everything he'd worked for gone. However, he looked up sharply. However, Mr. Seagal declined to press charges. Henley blinked, confused. "Hey, what?" Sergeant Dalton spoke for the first time, his voice gruff. "He also sent a letter to this office, specifically addressed to Chief Morrison." The chief reached into the folder again and pulled out a single piece of paper. It wasn't typed. It was handwritten, in neat, deliberate script. She slid it across the table to Henley, read it. Henley picked up the paper with shaking hands. His eyes scanned the words. To whom it may concern, I don't believe Officer Brock Henley is a bad person. I believe he made a bad choice. There's a difference. I've worked with law enforcement for many years. I know the pressures officers face. I know the fear, the weight of responsibility, the constant stress of the badge. I also know that people are capable of change, if they're given the chance and the proper guidance. I'm asking that instead of ending Officer Henley's career, you give him an opportunity to learn, to train, to grow into the kind of officer this community deserves. Because the world doesn't need more punishment. It needs more understanding. And I believe that with the right mentorship and accountability, Officer Henley can become part of the solution instead of part of the problem. I'm willing to help make that happen. Respectfully, Steven Seagal. Henley stared at the letter, his hands trembling so badly the paper rattled. His throat closed up. His eyes burned. He read it again and again. His voice cracked. Why would he do that? Chief Morrison leaned back in her chair, studying him carefully. I asked him the same thing. Do you know what he said? Henley shook his head, unable to speak. He said, because I've made mistakes too. And someone gave me a second chance. So I'm giving him one. Tears slid down Henley's face before he could stop them. He wiped them away quickly. Ashamed, but they kept coming. Councilwoman Torres spoke for the first time, her voice firm but not unkind. Officer Henley, here's what's going to happen. You're suspended without pay for 60 days effective immediately. During that time, you will undergo mandatory counseling with a licensed therapist specializing in anger management and authority issues. You will complete 100 hours of community service, specifically working with underprivileged youth, and you will attend a 3-day intensive workshop on de-escalation, civil rights, and community policing. She paused, letting that sink in. That workshop will be taught by Mr. Steven Seagal himself. Henley's head snapped up. What? Sergeant Dalton nodded. He's offering to come here, to Flagstaff, to train our officers, all of them. And you, Officer Henley, will be in that room, front row, every single session. Henley's voice was barely a whisper. Why? Why would he do that for me? He's not doing it for you, Chief Morrison said bluntly. He's doing it for this community, for the people you're supposed to protect, and for every other officer in this department who needs to remember what that badge actually means. She stood, and everyone else stood with her. You have a choice, Officer Henley. You can accept this opportunity, do the work, and prove that you're capable of change. Or you can refuse, and your employment here will be terminated immediately. Henley stood on shaking legs. I'll do it. Whatever it takes, I'll do it. Chief Morrison nodded once. Then don't waste this chance, because you won't get another one. Type Bella EV if you think people can change, or DoBT if you think some people never will, and comment where you're watching from. Let's see how far this story reaches. 2 months later, on a cold December morning, Steven Seagal walked through the front doors of the Flagstaff Police Department Training Center. He wore simple black clothing, a jacket, jeans, boots, no entourage, no cameras, no fanfare, just a man keeping his word. The training center's main room had been set up with rows of chairs facing a small podium. 50 officers filled those chairs. Some were veterans with 20 years on the job. Some were rookies fresh out of the academy. All of them were here because their chief had made attendance mandatory. And sitting in the very front row, exactly as instructed, was Officer Brock Henley. He looked different than he had 2 months ago. Thinner. Tired. The arrogance was gone from his face. In its place was something raw and uncertain. A man who'd been broken down and was trying desperately to build himself back up into something better. Steven walked to the front of the room, his movements calm and deliberate. He stood at the podium, looked out over the faces staring back at him, and spoke. Good morning. My name is Steven Seagal. Some of you know me from movies. Some of you know me from my work in law enforcement. But today, I'm not here as an actor or a martial artist. I'm just here as someone who believes we can all be better than we were yesterday. He paused, letting his words settle. I was arrested by one of your officers 2 months ago. He didn't know who I was. And honestly, that's exactly why it mattered. Murmurs rippled through the room. Several officers glanced at Henley. He kept his eyes forward, jaw tight, fighting to hold himself together. Steven continued, because respect shouldn't be conditional. You shouldn't treat someone well because they're famous, or powerful, or wealthy, or connected. You should treat them well because they're human. Because every person you encounter, every single one, has dignity, has worth, has a story you don't know. He stepped out from behind the podium, walking slowly along the front row. When you put on that badge, you're not just enforcing the law. You're embodying it. You're showing people what justice looks like, what fairness looks like, what strength looks like. He stopped directly in front of Henley. Their eyes met, and real strength isn't about dominance. It's about control of yourself, your emotions, your ego, your fear. Henley's eyes glistened, but he didn't look away. Steven's voice softened slightly. So let me ask you all a question. What does justice look like to you? Silence. Then a hand went up near the back. A young officer, maybe 25, spoke hesitantly. Fairness, sir. Good. What else? Another hand.
Accountability.
Yes. What else? A female officer in the third row spoke quietly. Compassion. Steven nodded slowly. Compassion. That's the one people forget. Because it's easy to be tough. It's hard to be kind. Especially when you have power. Especially when someone disrespects you or challenges you or makes you feel small. He turned back to face the full room. It's in those moments, those hard moments, that you show who you really are. Not when things are easy, but when they're difficult. He walked back to the center. Officer Henley and I had a conflict. He made a mistake, a serious one. But instead of destroying him, I chose to see him as someone capable of growth. Someone capable of change. Steven turned to Henley. And now, he has the chance to prove me right, or prove me wrong. He extended his hand. Henley stood slowly, his legs unsteady. Tears streamed openly down his face now, and he didn't try to hide them. I'm sorry, he said, his voice breaking.
I'm so sorry.
I know you are. I don't deserve this. I don't deserve your forgiveness. Maybe not, Steven said gently. But I'm giving it to you anyway. What you do with it, that's up to you. They shook hands. The room erupted in applause, not because it was expected, but because 50 officers, hardened, skeptical, exhausted officers, had just witnessed something they'd almost forgotten existed. Grace, mercy, second chances, and the possibility that even someone who'd fallen as far as Brock Henley could rise again. Over the next 3 days, Steven Seagal trained the Flagstaff Police Department. He taught them verbal de-escalation techniques. He taught them how to read body language, how to calm situations instead of inflaming them. He taught them empathy, how to see the person behind the problem. He taught them that the goal isn't to win every encounter, but to resolve it safely. He taught them practical martial arts skills, but emphasized that physical force should always be the last resort, not the first. And most importantly, he taught them to see themselves clearly, to recognize their own triggers, their own biases, their own need to feel powerful. On the final day, after the last session ended, Officer Brock Henley stood up in front of all his colleagues. His voice was steady, but you could hear the emotion underneath. I want to say something. The room quieted. Everyone turned to look at him. I was wrong. Not just about Mr. Seagal, but about a lot of things. I thought being a cop meant being feared. I thought power meant making people submit. I thought respect was something you demanded. He paused, his voice thick. But it's not. Respect is something you earn. Power is something you use to protect, not to hurt. And being a cop means serving people, all people, not just the ones who make you feel important. He looked at Steven, who stood quietly at the back of the room. You gave me a second chance when I didn't deserve one. When no one would have blamed you for ending my career. And I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure I deserve it. Steven nodded once. A simple acknowledgement. Then you're already on the right path. Comment REST PT if you believe in second chances. Comment JST if you think actions speak louder than words. And tell me where you're from. We're connecting people all over the world through this story. 6 months later, on a warm spring evening, Officer Brock Henley walked into Mel's diner. The same diner where it all began. The same diner where he'd humiliated a man in front of dozens of witnesses. The same diner where his entire life had fallen apart. He stood in the doorway for a moment, his hand still on the handle, his heart pounding in his chest. This wasn't an easy thing to do. Coming back here, facing these people, but he knew he had to. Because part of changing wasn't just saying you were sorry. It was showing up. It was facing the damage you'd caused. It was looking people in the eye and owning what you'd done. The door chimed as it closed behind him. Heads turned. Conversations paused. And then someone recognized him. That's him. A man whispered to his wife. That's the cop from the video. Henley felt every eye in the diner land on him like a physical weight. His instinct was to turn around, to leave, to run, but he didn't. He took a deep breath and walked toward the counter. Donna, the older waitress with silver hair, was refilling someone's coffee when she looked up and saw him. Her hand froze mid-pour. Her eyes went wide. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Henley spoke, his voice quiet and respectful. Donna. She set the coffee pot down carefully. her expression guarded. "Officer Henley, I know I'm probably the last person you wanted to see walk through that door." She didn't disagree. He swallowed hard and continued. "But I needed to come back. I needed to. I owe you an apology." Donna crossed her arms, her face uncertain. "Me? Yes, ma'am. You tried to stand up for that man. You tried to do the right thing. And I shut you down. I disrespected you. I made you feel small. And that was wrong." His voice cracked slightly, but he pushed through. "I'm sorry, Donna. Truly sorry." The diner had gone completely silent. Everyone was listening now. Donna studied his face for a long moment, searching for sincerity, and she found it. Her expression softened just slightly. "Thank you for saying that," she said quietly. "That takes courage." "It's the least I could do." She nodded slowly, then gestured toward the counter. "You want some coffee?" "Just coffee. And I'd like to sit for a bit if that's okay." "Counter or booth?" Henley glanced toward the corner booth, the booth where Steven had sat, where this whole nightmare had started. "Counter's fine." He sat down on one of the worn vinyl stools, his police uniform replaced today by plain clothes, jeans and a flannel shirt. He wasn't here as Officer Henley. He was here as Brock, just a man trying to make amends. Donna poured him a cup of coffee, the steam rising between them. "You look different," she said carefully. "I feel different. Good different or bad different. Honestly, both. It's been the hardest 6 months of my life, but also the most important." Earl, the gray-haired truck driver, was sitting 3 stools down. He'd been watching the whole exchange in silence, his weathered face unreadable. Finally, he spoke, his voice gravelly from years of cigarettes and coffee. "Henley." Brock turned to face him. "Earl." A long silence stretched between them. Then Earl slid a laminated menu across the counter toward him. "Heard you went through some training." "I did. 3 months of it. Counseling, too." "Good. That was it. No lecture. No forgiveness speech. Just acknowledgement." And somehow that simple word, "good," meant more to Henley than 1,000 speeches could have. Because Earl didn't owe him kindness. But he'd given it anyway. Henley picked up the menu, his throat tight with emotion. "Thanks, Earl. Don't thank me. Just keep doing better." "I will. I promise." They sat in companionable silence for a moment. 2 men who'd once been on opposite sides of a horrible moment, now just sharing space at a diner counter. 10 minutes later, the door chimed again. A man walked in, jeans, black jacket, calm, measured steps. Steven Seagal. The entire diner went silent once more. But this time it wasn't fear, it was awe, respect. Donna's face lit up immediately. "Mr. Seagal." Steven smiled warmly at her. "Hello, Donna. Good to see you again. I didn't know you were back in town. Just passing through. Thought I'd stop by for some of that excellent coffee." She beamed, already reaching for a mug. "Your meal's on the house, Mr. Seagal. Forever. I mean it." Steven laughed gently, shaking his head. "That's very kind of you, Donna, but it's not necessary." "It's necessary to me," she said firmly. "After what you did, how you handled everything, your family here. Well, then I'm honored." He glanced around the diner, his eyes landing on the corner booth, the same booth where he'd sat 6 months ago. Empty now. He started walking toward it. And then he noticed Brock Henley sitting at the counter. Their eyes met. For a split second, the entire diner held its breath. Henley's face went pale. His hands gripped his coffee mug, but he didn't look away. Steven's expression remained calm, unreadable. He changed direction and walked toward the counter instead. Henley stood immediately, his stool scraping backward. "Mr. Seagal." "Officer Henley." Steven extended his hand. "Good to see you." Henley stared at the offered hand like he couldn't quite believe it was real. Then he reached out and shook it, his grip firm but trembling slightly. I didn't know you were back in town. Just passing through again. Seems like this place has become a stop I can't skip." Steven gestured to the stool beside Henley. "May I join you?" Henley blinked, stunned. You want to sit with me? If you don't mind." No, of course not. Please." Steven sat down beside him and Donna immediately brought over another mug of coffee, her hands shaking slightly with excitement. "Here you go, Mr. Seagal."
"Thank you, Donna."
She walked away, still smiling, and whispered something to the cook through the kitchen window. Within seconds, the whole kitchen staff was peeking out to catch a glimpse. Earl raised his coffee mug slightly in Steven's direction. A quiet salute. Steven returned the gesture. Then he turned to Henley. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Just 2 men sitting at a diner counter, the weight of their shared history hanging in the air between them. Finally, Steven broke the silence. "I've been following your work." Henley looked up, surprised. "You have?" "I have. Heard you've been doing community outreach, working with at-risk youth." Henley nodded, his voice quiet. "Yeah, I've been teaching kids about respect, about responsibility, about thinking before you act. It's been humbling. It's important work. It's the least I can do. Steven took a sip of his coffee, his movements slow and deliberate. How are you doing, Brock? Really? Henley let out a long breath. Honestly, some days are harder than others. Some days I wake up and I still hate myself for what I did, for who I was, and other days, I feel like maybe I'm becoming someone better, someone I can actually be proud of. Steven nodded slowly. That's growth. That's what it looks like. Henley's eyes reddened, but he fought back the tears. I wanted to thank you for not giving up on me, for giving me a chance when no one else would have. You don't need to thank me. Yes, I do. You could have destroyed my life. You had every right to. But you didn't. Steven set his coffee down and turned to face Henley fully. Can I tell you something? Of course. I didn't forgive you because you deserved it. I forgave you because I needed to. Because holding on to anger, even justified anger, only hurts the person carrying it. He paused, and I'd seen enough anger in my life. I didn't want to carry any more. Henley nodded slowly, absorbing the words. But here's the thing, Steven continued. Forgiveness isn't the same as forgetting. And it doesn't erase what happened. You still did what you did. And you still have to live with that. I know. Good. Because the real question isn't whether I forgive you. It's whether you've forgiven yourself. Henley looked down at his hands. I don't know if I can. Then that's your work. Not punishment, not self-hatred, but honest reflection. Understanding why you did what you did, and making sure you never do it again. Henley's voice was barely a whisper. How do I do that? Steven smiled faintly. One day at a time. One choice at a time. One person at a time. He stood, placing a hand on Henley's shoulder. You're on the right path, Brock. Don't give up on yourself. A lot of people are counting on you to keep going. I won't let them down. I believe you. Steven walked toward the door, but before he left, he turned back to the entire diner. Thank you all for the kindness. This place, and the people in it, remind me why I still have hope. Donna wiped tears from her eyes. Earl raised his mug again, and several people started clapping. Steven waved once, a humble gesture, and walked out into the warm evening air. Henley sat at the counter for a long time after Steven left, staring into his coffee, replaying the conversation in his mind. Donna approached carefully. You okay, Han? He looked up at her, and for the first time in 6 months he smiled, a real, genuine smile. Yeah, Donna, I think I am. She patted his hand. Good. Because we're all rooting for you. Even after what I did. Especially after what you did. Takes a lot more strength to change than to stay the same. Henley nodded, feeling something shift inside him. Something lighter, something hopeful. He finished his coffee, left a generous tip, and walked out of Mel's diner. But this time, he wasn't running from his past. He was walking toward his future. 1 year later, Officer Brock Henley stood on a small stage at the Flagstaff Police Department's annual awards ceremony. He wore his dress uniform, the fabric crisp and clean. In his hands, he held a plaque, the Community Service Medal. Chief Morrison stood beside him at the microphone. This award is given to officers who go above and beyond in serving their community, and this year's recipient has shown extraordinary dedication, humility, and growth. She turned to Henley. Officer Henley created the Badge of Hope program, a mentorship initiative pairing officers with at-risk youth. In 1 year, he's helped 23 kids stay in school, avoid the justice system, and find positive role models. Applause filled the room. Henley stepped up to the microphone, his hands shaking slightly. Thank you. But I didn't do this alone. I had help. From my colleagues, from my community, and from a man who believed I could be better when I didn't believe it myself. He paused, looking out at the audience. A wise man once told me that a badge doesn't make you better than anyone. It makes you responsible for everyone. I didn't understand that a year ago. But I do now. His voice grew stronger. And I'm going to spend the rest of my career, the rest of my life, living up to that responsibility. The room erupted in applause once more, and in the back of the room, unnoticed by most, Steven Seagal stood quietly. He hadn't been invited. He hadn't announced his presence. He'd simply come to see if the seed he'd planted had taken root, and it had. He smiled faintly, nodded once to himself, and slipped out the back door. His work here was done. Type GROTH if you believe people can change. Type LIGACY if you believe the best lessons are the ones we pass on. And tell us what part of this story hit you the hardest. We read every comment. So what's the lesson here? What's the real takeaway from everything that happened in that small diner in Flagstaff, Arizona? It's not just about one police officer who let power go to his head. It's not just about one actor who chose mercy over revenge. It's about something much bigger than that. It's about all of us. about the choices we make every single day, about how we treat people when we think nobody's watching, about who we become when we're given power, whether that's a badge, a title, money, influence, or just a moment of control over someone else. Because every single day, in ways big and small, we have a choice. When someone disrespects us, we can respond with anger and retaliation, or we can respond with dignity and grace. When someone wrongs us, we can seek revenge and destruction, or we can seek understanding and redemption. When someone falls, stumbles, makes a terrible mistake, we can kick them while they're down, or we can reach out a hand and help them stand back up. And the choice we make in that moment doesn't just affect them. It affects everyone watching. It affects the people around us who are learning from our example. It shapes the kind of world we live in. It defines who we are. Steven Seagal had every reason to destroy Officer Brock Henley's career. He had the platform to do it. He had the public support. Millions of people were on his side, demanding justice, demanding consequences. He had the legal right to press charges, to sue, to make sure Henley never wore a badge again. But he chose something different, something harder. He chose forgiveness. Not because Henley deserved it, he didn't. Not because it was easy, it wasn't. But because Steven understood something that most people forget. Punishment might satisfy our need for justice in the moment. But redemption, true redemption, changes lives. Not just the life of the person who's forgiven, but the lives of everyone who witnesses it. Because somewhere out there, right now, someone's watching this story. Someone who's been hurt. Someone who's been disrespected, dismissed, humiliated, or treated like they don't matter. Someone who's angry, bitter, filled with rage at the injustice they've experienced. And they need to see that responding with grace doesn't make you weak. It makes you strong. They need to know that choosing forgiveness over vengeance doesn't mean you're a doormat. It means you're powerful enough to break the cycle. But here's the other half of the lesson, the part that's just as important. Forgiveness is powerful, incredibly powerful. But it only works if the person receiving it chooses to grow. Officer Brock Henley could have taken Steven's mercy and learned nothing from it. He could have stayed bitter, defensive, convinced that he was the victim. He could have blamed the media, blamed the public, blamed Steven for ruining his reputation. But he didn't. He took responsibility. He did the hard work. The counseling, the training, the soul searching. He faced the people he'd hurt and apologized. He changed his life from the inside out. And that's why this story has a happy ending. Not because of the forgiveness alone, but because of what was done with it. So here's the question for you, the person watching this right now. When you have power, whether it's a badge, a title, wealth, influence, or just a voice, how do you use it? Do you lift people up? Or do you push them down? Do you demand respect through fear? Or do you earn it through integrity? Do you see people as obstacles to overcome? Or as human beings deserving of dignity? Because the way you treat people when you think no one's watching, when there are no cameras, no witnesses, no consequences, that's who you really are. Not the persona you project, not the image you cultivate, but the truth of your character. And one day, I promise you, it will be tested. One day, the person you look down on might be the person you need. The person you dismissed might be the person who saves you. The person you humiliated might be the person who has the power to forgive you, or destroy you. And in that moment, you'll understand what Steven Seagal understood in that diner. True strength is silent, true power is humble, and true respect is earned, not demanded. If this story moved you, if it made you think, if it challenged something inside you, type was.As in the comments. If you believe in second chances, if you think people can change, if you've ever been given grace when you didn't deserve it, type farjiv. If you think we all need to do better, to be kinder, to see each other's humanity, type bet2r. And please tell me, where are you watching from? I want to know how far this message is reaching. I want to connect with every person who believes that we can build a better world. One choice, one act of kindness, one moment of grace at a time. Your comments don't just help us create better content. They build a community. They show that there are still people out there who believe in honor, integrity, humility, and second chances. We've got more powerful stories coming your way. Stories about ordinary people doing extraordinary things. Stories about humility triumphing over arrogance. Stories about respect, justice, redemption, and the quiet strength that changes the world. So make sure you're subscribed. Hit that button right now. Turn on notifications so you never miss a story. And share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Maybe it's someone who's been hurt and needs to see that grace is possible. Maybe it's someone in a position of power who needs to remember what that responsibility actually means. Maybe it's someone who's made mistakes and needs to know that change is possible, that it's never too late to become better. Because stories like this don't just entertain us. They don't just pass the time. They inspire us. They challenge us. They plant seeds in our hearts that grow into something beautiful. They remind us of who we want to be. And they give us hope that even in a world that can be harsh, cruel, and unforgiving, there's still room for mercy, still room for grace, still room for second chances. Thank you for watching. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being part of this community of people who still believe that kindness matters, that character matters, that how we treat each other matters. You are the reason we keep creating these stories. You are the reason this message spreads. You are proof that there's still good in this world. Now tell us in the comments, what part of this story hit you the hardest? Was it the moment Steven chose forgiveness? Was it when Henley broke down and apologized? Was it when he stood up a year later, completely transformed? Or was it something else entirely? We read every single comment, and your feedback helps us create even better stories that touch even more hearts. Remember, you don't need a badge, a title, or fame to make a difference in this world. You just need to choose respect, choose kindness, choose to see people really see them as human beings with dignity, worth, and a story you don't know every single day. More incredible stories are coming soon. Stay tuned, stay kind, and never forget, the world doesn't change because of grand gestures. It changes because of small moments of grace. Like the one that happened in a little diner in Flagstaff, Arizona, when one man chose forgiveness, and another man chose to become better. See you in the next one. Keep watching, keep believing, keep being the change.